month and a half a state election, and I can't tell you what Labor or Liberal stands for in terms of country rail. And there is an answer, of course. They don't stand for anything. We want a consistent public transport policy based on rail. We don't want freeways. We don't want tunnels. We can't afford tunnels, but we can afford a decent rail system. I've got to say that we've seen some amazing political alliances. We see, from what I can understand, the poles of the political spectrum, Labor and Liberal, joined together in a deathly silence, and the Greens and the Country Alliance, who I've got to say aren't natural bedfellows either, joined together in supporting us on country rail. We live in very strange times, my friends, very strange times.
And there really is a resurgence in people wanting to get their rail back. And the reason why they've lost their rail is because of Conservative governments. We have people in Cobram, Mill, Horsham, and down in Leongatha, Portland, Hamilton. There's a new group that started up at Yarrawonga. They all want their rail and passenger services back. And part of the service, the removal of our country rail services also was ignited by Jeff Kennett, who systematically took 6.3 million tonnes of freight rail, off freight rail, and put it on the trucks. And consequently, today, our roads are filled with freight on trucks that should be on rail. And that's the type of political duplicity and stupidity that our politicians actually show. But on the other case, on the other side of that, there is Sonia Smith, who is a National Party member and standing candidate for the seat of Ballarat East. And she said that, and conferred that the rail lines are the lifeblood for country Victorians.
Hi guys, I'm Christian, I'm the President of the North West Rail Alliance. We're advocating to bring our passenger services back between Maryborough and Mildura, which was taken away by Alan Brown and Jeff Kennett in September 1993. We're actually at a bit of an advantage. We actually already have a train track and it functions, but it's been abused. It's been left to rot away without a maintenance clause. The trouble we have is that we have a very safe national seat in Mildura, an old man called Peter Crisp, who doesn't want to give anything. All he wants to do is work on his freight plan and toe the party line in Melbourne. He thinks there's no money to be made in passenger rail and that buses are totally adequate. The problem with that, however, is they're not. He doesn't listen to what people are saying to him and his own electorate, because he sits on a double-digit advantage. So the seats of Mildura and Ripon need to be marginal, unfortunately, to get anything. We can bang, we can make a racket, we can put stuff in the paper, but the reality of it is for us, we're a long way away, and they just don't care. Unfortunately, it's true. So we've only just started. The election isn't the end. We don't think we're going to get it. We've got to be realistic. It's not going to happen in the next 30 days. It's just not going to happen. It's a long, hard battle. We've just incorporated. We work closely with Noel and Scott and the Rail Revival Alliance, and we will get our train back. But it's going to be a long, hard slog.
Here we are. Chris Canton from the Leongatha train group. I'd like to introduce Chris.
Okay, Leongatha, another service that was lost under the Kennett ministry on July the 24th, 1993. 2 years later, the line from Dandenong to Cranbourne was electrified. And since then, Labor have promised to electrify the railway line to Cranbourne East or Clyde, 3.5 kilometres extra from the system. And, of course, in 1999, when they defeated Jeff Kennett, Susan Davies, who was an independent, backed Labor to return the Leongatha service. Of course, 6 years ago, on May the 1st, budget night, Leongatha got axed. Unfortunate, because apparently there would have been a lack of patronage, which seems completely false, because the bus services, there is about 16 bus services return each day in that region. There's now going to be 48 going into, within and out of the region within the next 5 years. And the fact that both the seat of Bass, held by Ken Smith, who's the Speaker retiring, is Liberal, and Peter Ryan, another National Party member, would rather give Leah Gatha or South Gippsland luxury road coach services because they're more cost effective. And
don't travel on them.
well, there is mixed, because I actually went to Southern Cross on Thursday with the PTV, and they maintained they're not going to rip up any more of the track like what they did at Cooey-Rupp, because they believe that that section must be maintained, since they believe South Gippsland is a growth corridor. And what was the other thing I was going to say? So the problem we've got is, we've got 2 Conservative seats. Peter Ryan would rather give the road coach services the service rather than the passenger train, which would serve a growth area of about 50,000 that includes Casey, Cardinia, South Gippsland, Wellington and Bass Coast. Now the reality is, we don't know how fast the train will be, but we're sure there will be a great alternative for South Gippsland residents, because the old train is still in 2 hours and that was a very slow one. And people want to live in this region. People moved to Lang Lang and Cooey-Rupp 10 years ago because they thought the line was going to reopen. And this line goes back a fair way, because 20 years ago, before the train was taken away, the South and West Gippsland Transport Group went as far back then and campaigned to have an extra service. However, Jeff Kennett and Alan Brown cut the service, and that's the story. We're campaigning to get it back. And if you want to join us on Facebook, we're Victorian Government Pretend Leah Gatha Pass South Gippsland Train. And I'm in collaboration with the South and West Gippsland Transport Group. Any updates, just speak to me. Hope we can get it back, and I just think South Gippsland has really suffered. And you look at their highway, there's potholes every 500 metres since they've introduced B-doubles onto that road.
Tony Murphy. Tony was the fellow. He was good enough to appear in the Sun the other day. He's the man who's taken the Victorian government to the Supreme Court to stop this.
Thanks, Noel. Yeah, I'd just like to say a few words. This project is not a done deal. Dennis Napthine thought he could sign the contract and then brush the legal challenges out of the way, and we get some clear air to talk about everything else he wanted to talk about leading up to the election. Well, we've got news for Dennis. We're not going away. We are going to win, and this project is well and truly within our reach to stop it. And the main thing I'd like to say today, though, is that this project would destroy regional Victoria. And that's because we're talking about $8 billion for the first step of the project, the eastern section. And we're talking about another $10 billion for the western section. We're talking about $18 billion worth of public money being sucked into this project. By far the most expensive road project ever in Australia. You know, for every metre, that's $1 million. $1 million a metre. Can you believe that?
We only want 100 metres. We only want 100 metres of their road.
That's it. It is complete insanity. And what it means is that if the road project was to go ahead, there'd be zero funds for any project in regional Victoria. All of your infrastructure budget for the life of the project, we're talking 25 years, that would all be gone. So we want some support from regional Victoria. When you go into the polling booth on the 29th of November, just have a think about who you're voting for. Because if Dennis Napthine gets back in, it's going to be a tough battle and we'd probably lose. If Labor gets back in, then there's a chance we can force them to stick to their promises. And we're looking at the Greens or the Socialist Party or some public transport independent candidates in inner Melbourne as a guarantee to try and keep Labor to their promise. So just have a bit of a think about it, because there'll be no money for anything in the whole of the state if the project proceeds. Thanks very much.
Well, we're miles in front of you up here because at the moment we only get 4%, the country gets 4% of the transport budget and Melbourne gets 96% anyway, so we haven't got much to lose really. But you've put on a hell of a good fight down there, you and your friends, and my congratulations. I'd like to call on Councillor Albert Calvano. Albert is the Shire President of the Southern Grampian Shire, I believe, from Hamilton. Of course, they've got their battles down there trying to get their chain as well. So, Albert, would you like to come up and just briefly address? I'd just like to give you a copy of our rail revival report to take back with you.
Well, thank you very much, Noel. And first of all, I'd like to thank everyone for the interest to the return of rail passenger and also freight, Noel. It's interesting to see that many people from right around our regions and rural areas have really campaigned to the governments and also the candidates standing for the 29th election to return of rail travel. In our advocacy plan in the Southern Grampian Shire Council, we have just adopted, and it's been a long time coming. It's 22 years we got our priorities, and one of the main priorities is to return passenger rail service from Ararat, Horsham, right through to Dunkeld, Glen Thompson, Hamilton, right through to Hayward and into Portland, and not only rail but also freight. In doing this here, we must all, more or less with our neighbouring shire, get together, and the mayors and CEOs have now combined together and joined forces, which is the West Wimmera Shire, the Northern Grampian Shire, the Southern Grampian Shire, the Errinbiack Shire, the Glenelg Shire, and a few more, so that we all actually meet every couple of months, and we take photographs and we campaign for the return of passenger rail. What we're looking for, the state government's looking for, is a catchment area of 100,000 people for us to return passenger rail to the southwest, and we make sure that we are heard by actually amalgamating together, talking together, meeting together, making proposals to the candidates and also to Terry Maldon. But I say to you all, for the return of passenger rail to our rural and regional areas, we must all combine together, southern groups, eastern and western, get together, have a meeting once in a while, discuss our problems and put it forward to the governments. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Noel.
Is there anyone from the Labor or Liberal or National parties here today? Do we have a representative? Do we have? Is that not up the back? No? I'm afraid to say they didn't appear.
They're useless.
Can I make a promise for them?
I was just presented Albert with a copy of our rail revival study. We couldn't afford to wait for the state government to do the feasibility study, so we did it ourselves. And I don't think that anyone could fault it in terms of its engineering. All right, now we're going to call on the Greens, John Brownstein, who's the member, who may be the member, he's certainly the candidate for Bendigo West, to briefly give us an outline of the Greens policy in terms of rail transport, country rail transport.
Thanks, Noel. Just a bit of history of myself. Born and raised in Horsham, Western Victoria. Studied and worked in Melbourne, Sale, Benalla, Swan Hill and now Bendigo. As part of my role in operations and emergency management for the Department of Education, I frequently travelled to Coburg via the rail system. Last week I made the mistake of thinking it might be quicker to get off at Footscray Station to catch a train to North Melbourne and then catch the train up to Upfield. It was very difficult to get in the train. The last guy in following me had his backpack jammed in the door. That's what the system is like. I know for a fact that Castlemaine people are giving up and moving back to the city because the train takes half an hour longer to get to Melbourne for them as commuters than it did 4 or 5 years ago. It's unacceptable. Why is this happening? Well, it's happening because there is a massive underinvestment in our regional rail.
Absolutely.
It's quite alarming. I've got the V-Line report given to the government in 2011, which sets a 20-year plan to address the infrastructure issues. This report has been shelved. But what it says on the Bendigo line is that we need to duplicate the line between Harcourt and Castlemaine. We need to duplicate the line between Kyneton and Taradale.
We need more crossing loops. We need to upgrade the east line near Kyneton to 160 k's an hour. It's currently 130. There are things that can be done to address this issue, and it's for the economic development of our region in Bendigo West, Castlemaine, Bendigo. It's crucial. See, my vision for Bendigo is a university city where young people can come and study there without a huge cost of having to move away from home. So why do we have a rail trip that goes 80 k's an hour to Echuca? V-Line's plan is by 2018 to upgrade that line to a Class 2 service, which increases the speed. That's important to families, it's important to our economic development in our region. I've had a look at some of the other lines, and I do apologise to the different networks. Geelong-Warrnambool, lack of crossing loops, level crossing upgrades needed. Ballarat line, duplication and electrification to Melton, additional passing loops. Double track Warrenheip to Bungaree. Swan Hill line, upgraded to a Class 2 track to 130 k's an hour. Crossing loop near Elmore needed. Lots of things to be done, but it can't be done without a commitment of government to actually fund this. Now the Greens will ask V-Line to cost it, the Greens will fund it, the Greens will see it implemented, but we need your support. If we get the balance of power in the upper house, if you vote for our upper house candidates, there will be a price for our support on other issues. We're committed to this. How does this fit with our policy? Climate change is a serious issue. Getting trucks and transport off roads onto rail is crucial. Transport infrastructure and land use planning must be integrated, re-establishing a central freight planning body to prioritise and develop rail freight networks and practices. And I'll just mention one more. There is a long list. Using regulation and incentives to shift an increasing proportion of freight from road to rail in cooperation with states, and standardising and upgrading the Victorian rail network and connecting major logistics sites by rail. And I've been chatting to some of the Northern Rail people. It is possible to combine freight and passenger services. We'd like to see that done. Thank you.
Robert Dinelli from the Australian Country Alliance. Robert's the upper house candidate for the Northern Province, and the Australian Country Alliance has always been very supportive as far as rail's concerned, and as I say, very interesting to see our Greens and our Country Alliance people apparently singing out of the same songbook. Thank you, Robert.
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you today. And I'm Robert Danielli. I'm running for the upper house of Northern Victoria, and sitting down here we have Elise Chapman, who's our candidate for Bendigo West. Australian Country Alliance has been going since the 2006 election, so this is our third attempt at the state election. We are a real country party for real country people. The Nationals, they've lost their way. When they were the country party, you probably could have said that. They have now lost their way. The Liberals, well, they look after their mates in the city. We intend to look after the country. And I'm surprised, I was at another talk the other night, and the Green candidate was there as well, and it was interesting that we did have a bit of overlap. The overlap we have today is that we do support rail policy, we do support reintroduction of rail services, we do support the fact that the infrastructure, the rail, the rail lines and the surrounds, they should never be destroyed. So even though they might decide not to run trains, leave the infrastructure, because you can see what happened when rail services discontinued on that Whittlesea line. We need it today. That was a huge mistake. The other thing we share with the Greens today is that we also are looking for the balance of power, and hopefully that's what happens this election, that you have a party like Australian Country Alliance that will do the right thing by all Victorians, and we have the balance of power to influence that. The things that we're looking at in Northern Victoria, Mildura, Chris, who mentioned the issue with Peter Crisp up at Mildura, you've got a great Australian Country Alliance candidate up there in Danny Lee. vote for people like Danny, and you'll see that we'll introduce a passenger service back to Mildura. We certainly want to see Sprinter train services from places like Swan Hill, so it gives you a rapid backwards and forwards, so people can actually leave Swan Hill at a reasonable time, get down to Melbourne and come back in the same day. We want to see that repeated right throughout rural Victoria. So we've got Echuca issues, we've got Shepparton, and then the feeder lines in between there. So certainly you've got a choice, and you know, vote the right way. Don't vote for the major parties, they have let you down. Vote for people like us that will support you. Thank you.
Just a couple of things. We've got the new report out. Thank you very much, Pyrenees Advocate, for printing these gratis and free for us. We've got copies, CV if you want them. Everybody's put in a hell of a good effort. We've got a month to go. We've got to keep the pressure up on the pollies. Let's drop the ball in the next 28 days. Thank you very much for coming, and thank you VGR for hosting us. We've got plenty of these as well.
For rally on 15th of November.
And we've got t-shirts, Alan. See Alan for t-shirts.
How long before we leave? How long before we leave?
You've got a quarter of an hour. On the dot. Thank you very much.